It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Not mine exactly, but my son Mason's wedding. I had spent years imagining this day, standing proudly at the back of the hall, watching him start a new life with someone he loved. I'd pictured it 100 different ways. Maybe I'd cry a little, maybe I'd laugh a lot. Maybe I'd just stand there and clap until my hands went numb. But nothing in all those daydreams prepared me for what I saw that afternoon. The ceremony was being held in a grand hotel ballroom downtown. The kind of place where the chandeliers sparkled like stars and the marble floors looked like they cost more than my old truck. I wasn't used to fancy places like that, but I wore my best black suit, the same one I had worn when Mason graduated college. I even got my boots polished, the scuff marks hidden so no one could say I hadn't tried. I stood there for a moment, breathing deep, telling myself I belonged here because I was Mason's father and that meant something. They led me to my seat at the front row, right where family was supposed to sit. There was a little folded card on the chair, just like all the others. At first, I didn't notice anything strange. I was too busy trying not to trip over the expensive carpet. But when I finally bent down to look, my heart stopped. The nameplate on my chair didn't say Mr. Daniel Cooper, like it should have. It didn't even say father of the groom. No, it said something else. Something that burned itself into my chest so hard I felt like I couldn't breathe. Low-educated fake dad. At first, I thought it was a mistake. A sick joke maybe. I glanced around, thinking someone would rush over, apologizing, swapping it out for the right card. But no one came. And then I heard it, the laughter. Quiet at first, like someone trying to hide it behind their hand, but it grew louder, crueler. When I lifted my eyes, I saw them, Claire's family. The Whitmores. Her mother, Judith, trying to cover her mouth as she laughed. Her father, Dr. Richard Whitmore, smirking like he had just seen a dog wearing a tuxedo. My ears burned. My palms started to sweat. I looked over at Mason, standing near the altar, straightening his cuffs. He hadn't seen it yet. Thank God he hadn't seen it yet. I stood up slowly. My first instinct was to leave. Get out of there before Mason noticed, before anyone else had a chance to point and laugh. My legs felt heavy, like they didn't want to move, but I forced them to step away from that awful little card. I made it halfway to the side door when I heard a voice, sharp and clear above the noise. Dad, wait. I stopped. I turned around, and there he was, Mason, jogging down the aisle toward me, the jacket of his navy blue suit flapping behind him. His face was red, not from embarrassment, but from anger. Real anger, the kind I hadn't seen on him since he was a teenager and someone tried to steal his bike. He reached me and grabbed my arm, squeezing tight. His voice shook a little when he said, Dad, let's go home. For a second, I just stared at him, too stunned to speak. I could feel every eye in the room on us, waiting to see what would happen next. But when I looked into Mason's face, into those familiar brown eyes that had once looked up at me from a crib, I knew what I had to do. I nodded. Together, we turned our backs on the ceremony, on the polished floors, the glittering chandeliers, the people who thought they were better than us. I could hear whispers and gasps behind us, but I didn't care. Mason didn't care either. His hand stayed firm on my shoulder, like he was shielding me from every daggered stare in the room. As we pushed through the heavy double doors, I caught a glimpse of Claire standing frozen at the altar, her white dress gleaming under the lights. Her mouth was open in shock. Judith's face was twisted into something ugly, and Dr. Whitmore looked like he had swallowed a lemon. Good. Let them see what it felt like to lose something precious. Outside, the sun was blinding. I blinked hard, trying to adjust. Mason walked a few steps ahead, his jaw clenched so tight I thought he might crack a tooth. We didn't say a word until we reached the parking lot. I fumbled with my keys for a second, hands still shaking, but Mason took them gently from me. I'll drive, Dad, he said. I got into the passenger seat like I was moving through water, heavy and slow. As Mason pulled out of the lot, I stared out the window, trying to gather my thoughts. I should have felt humiliated. I should have felt crushed. And part of me did. But there was another part, bigger and stronger, that felt something else entirely: pride. Mason could have ignored it. He could have let them laugh and carried on with his perfect little wedding. But he didn't. He chose me. He chose respect over appearances, loyalty over show. He chose love. We drove in silence for a long time, the city flashing by in blurs of glass and metal. My mind kept going back to that nameplate, the ugly black letters printed so neat and bold. Low-educated fake dad. That's how they saw me. Not as a man who had worked 2 jobs to keep the lights on. Not as a father who had learned to braid hair with clumsy fingers when Mason wanted to dress up as a superhero with a cape. Not as the man who had sat up all night when Mason had pneumonia, praying to a god he wasn't even sure he believed in. No, just some fool they could laugh at. Mason tapped the steering wheel lightly with his fingers. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said finally, voice low. "I should have seen it coming. I should have known." "You couldn't have known," I said. My throat was thick, but I forced the words out. "And you stood by me. That's all that matters." He glanced over, and for the first time all day, he smiled. It wasn't a big smile, but it was real. And it reminded me of all the other smiles over the years, the missing teeth grins, the sheepish teenage smirks, the proud graduation day beam. Smiles that belonged to the boy I had raised. We didn't go home right away. Instead, Mason pulled into the old diner on 4th Street, the one we used to go to after Little League games. It was nearly empty, just a few tired truckers and a waitress wiping down counters. We sat in a booth by the window. Mason ordered coffee. I ordered pie. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. The world outside kept spinning. The Whitmores were probably scrambling to explain why the groom had abandoned the wedding. Maybe they were still laughing at me. Maybe they were cursing me. I didn't care. I had my son. I had the kind of love no degree could buy and no cruel words could tear down. For the first time that day, sitting in that old vinyl booth, I felt at peace. They could call me whatever they wanted. I knew who I was. I was his father. And that was enough. The drive home from the diner was quiet, but not heavy. There was a peace between us, the kind that only comes after the worst has happened and you realize you're still standing. As we pulled into the driveway of our little house on Maple Lane, I let out a breath I didn't even realize I'd been holding. The porch light flickered as it always did. The paint on the fence was chipped, and the lawn could have used a trim. But to me, it was the most beautiful sight in the world. Mason got out first, unlocking the door like he had done 1,000 times growing up. I followed slowly, my legs stiff from sitting too long. Inside, the house smelled like old leather and coffee, comfort smells, familiar smells. Mason dropped the keys on the hallway table, shrugged off his jacket, and turned to me with a look I hadn't seen in years. It wasn't embarrassment. It wasn't anger. It was sadness, raw and deep. "I didn't mean for today to turn out like this," he said quietly. I shook my head. "You didn't do anything wrong." He sat down heavily on the old couch, the one we had patched together more times than I could count. I sat across from him in the recliner that had been my throne for nearly 2 decades. The same chair where I read Mason bedtime stories when he was little. The same chair where I waited up for him when he was 15 and stayed out past curfew. Memories flooded in, uninvited but welcome. I remembered the nights we spent on that couch when the power got cut off, wrapped in blankets, eating cold beans from a can and laughing like it was an adventure. I remembered how, when Mason was about 8, he'd swear he would grow up rich enough to buy me a real leather recliner. One that doesn't squeak when you lean back, he promised. I told him I liked the squeak. It reminded me the chair was alive, just like our home. I smiled at the memory, and for the first time that evening, I felt the weight on my chest lighten a little. Mason leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You ever think, maybe I should have just married someone simpler? Someone who didn't come with a family like that?" I let the question hang in the air. It wasn't my place to tell him who to love. Love wasn't about logic. It wasn't a checklist you could cross off neatly. It was messy, confusing, stubborn. I knew that better than most. Instead of answering right away, I stood up and wandered into the kitchen. I pulled 2 beers from the fridge, cheap ones, the kind we used to split on Saturday nights after working on the truck, and handed one to Mason. He accepted it with a small smile. "You loved her," I said finally, sinking back into my chair. "You don't get to choose where your heart goes. You just hope it's going somewhere good." Mason nodded slowly, staring at the floor. I thought Claire was different. I thought she loved me for who I was, not for how much I could impress her family. I took a sip of my beer. It was bitter, sharp, familiar. Maybe she did. But love isn't just words, son. It's actions. It's who stands beside you when everything falls apart. He looked up at me then, his eyes a little shinier than before. "You always stood by me. Always will." The clock on the wall ticked loudly. Somewhere outside, a dog barked, and a car rumbled down the street. Life kept moving, even when your heart felt frozen in place. I thought back to the years that had led us here. All the moments that built the bond between us. Scraped knees and broken toys. Parent-teacher conferences where the teachers looked at me like I was a sideshow because I didn't use fancy words or wear pressed suits. Nights when Mason had the flu, and I slept on the floor beside his bed, just to be close if he needed me. Days when I barely had 2 nickels to rub together, but Mason still had lunch money in his pocket. I wasn't perfect. I made mistakes. Lost my temper sometimes. Missed a few school plays when I couldn't get off my shift. But I never missed the big things. Birthdays. Graduations. Every moment that mattered. And no matter what anyone said about my education or my bank account, no one could ever take that away from me. You remember, I said, leaning back with a creak, the time you broke your arm playing backyard football? Mason chuckled. Yeah, I thought you were going to kill me. I thought you were going to kill me, I said, laughing. You screamed so loud the neighbor came running with a baseball bat, thinking we were getting robbed. Mason laughed harder, the tension easing from his shoulders. You carried me 2 blocks to the truck. I was heavy back then. You were heavier because you wouldn't stop crying. We both laughed, the sound filling the small room like sunlight breaking through a storm. For a little while, we weren't the father and son who had just walked out of a ruined wedding. We were just 2 stubborn souls, bruised but unbroken, clinging to the one thing that had never let us down, each other. Later that night, after Mason went to bed in his old room, I sat out on the porch with another beer, watching the stars blink overhead. The air was cool, the kind that hinted at fall just around the corner. I rocked slowly in the porch chair, listening to the night sounds, crickets, the distant hum of traffic, the creak of the old wood beneath me. I thought about Claire's parents, about all their money, their degrees, their polished words. None of it had taught them kindness. None of it had taught them respect. They had everything a man could want, except the one thing that mattered most, heart. And maybe, just maybe, the world had a funny way of balancing things out. I didn't know then what would happen next. I didn't know about the news that would break the following morning, or how the very people who had laughed at me would find themselves the laughingstock of the town. But in that moment, sitting on my porch with the night wrapped around me like an old blanket, I knew one thing for certain. I had already won. I had raised a good man. And no insult, no nameplate, no cruel laughter could ever take that victory away. I took a long sip from the bottle and tipped my head back, smiling up at the stars. Let the world think what it wanted. I knew the truth. And so did my son. There's a certain kind of fight that lives deep inside you when you're a man who's had to claw his way through life with nothing but bare hands and stubbornness. I never planned on being a single father. Nobody plans for something like that. Laura and I thought we had forever. She was the smart one between us, the one with dreams bigger than our little town could hold. When she got sick, it felt like the world tilted sideways, and no matter how hard I tried to straighten it, it never really went back. After she passed, it was just me and Mason. I was 24 years old with a mortgage I couldn't afford, a toddler who cried for his mother every night, and a hole in my chest so wide I didn't think anything would ever fill it. People whispered about me back then. I could hear them in the grocery store when they thought I wasn't listening. Poor kid, he doesn't have a chance. Daniel Cooper's gonna mess that boy up. He should just give the kid to Laura's parents. They've got money, education, a proper home. Laura's parents, the Holloways, didn't waste any time. 2 weeks after the funeral, they showed up on my doorstep with a lawyer and a custody petition. I still remember standing on that porch, Mason clinging to my jeans, staring down at Laura's mother with her perfect hair and her eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She looked at me like I was something she found stuck to the bottom of her shoe. Be reasonable, Daniel, she said, like she was offering me a deal and not trying to steal my whole world away. You can't possibly raise him alone. He needs better. I didn't say much. Never been the type for fancy speeches. I just told them no. Simple as that. They didn't listen. Took me to court 3 times. Tried to paint me as unfit because I never finished high school, because I worked with my hands, because my house was small and my wallet was even smaller. I'll never forget the feeling of sitting in that courtroom, wearing the only tie I owned, listening to their lawyer talk about me like I wasn't even human, like I was just some obstacle standing between them and what they wanted. They had charts and expert witnesses and photographs. I had calloused hands, bloodshot eyes, and the desperate love of a man who had lost everything except his boy. It should have been a slaughter. On paper, I didn't stand a chance. But sometimes, God sends you an angel in the ugliest battles. Her name was Julianne Price, court-appointed attorney, barely out of law school. She looked like she should still be taking exams, not fighting battles in front of a judge. But she fought for me like I was her own blood. She dragged every dirty trick the Holloways tried into the light. She showed the court what they really cared about: control, not love. The day the judge ruled in my favor, Mason was curled up on my lap, playing with my work boots. I didn't even hear the first part of the decision. All I heard was the part that mattered. Full custody granted to Mr. Daniel Cooper. I broke down right there in the courtroom. Couldn't help it. Ugly, choking sobs that I tried to swallow but couldn't. Julian just patted my back awkwardly and said, "You earned this. Don't let anyone tell you different." I didn't. From that day forward, Mason was mine to raise, mine to protect. Every scraped knee, every spelling test, every Christmas morning when there was barely enough under the tree, but somehow it was still magical, I gave it to him with everything I had. Sometimes, late at night when he was little, I'd sit by his bed and just watch him breathe. I was so scared I would screw it all up. That somehow love wouldn't be enough. That maybe the Holloways were right and I wasn't good enough. But every morning when Mason woke up and grinned at me with that gap-toothed smile, I told myself I could figure it out. And I did. Not perfectly. Not by any parenting book standards. But by the only one that mattered: showing up, staying, loving without limits. As he got older, the world didn't get any kinder. Teachers who looked down their noses when I showed up to conferences in my oil-stained boots. Other parents who invited Mason to birthday parties but not me to barbecues. It hurt sometimes, more than I wanted to admit. But Mason never cared. He'd come home from school talking about the kids whose parents had PhDs or corner offices, and I'd brace myself for the day he'd start to wish he had someone better for a father. But it never came. Instead, he'd say things like, "Dad, you're the smartest guy I know. You can fix anything." And he meant it. Not because I could solve algebra problems or negotiate business deals, but because he trusted that when he needed me, I'd always be there. When Mason turned 15, I sat him down and told him about the court battle. Told him how close I came to losing him. I thought he deserved to know. I expected anger maybe, or sadness. But he just sat there quietly, then hugged me so tight I thought my ribs would crack. "You didn't lose me, Dad," he said. "You never will." Now, sitting on the porch all these years later, those words came back to me clear as a bell. After everything, the nameplate, the laughter, the humiliation, none of it could touch that bond. They didn't know the battles we had fought together. They didn't know the nights spent wrapped up in each other's stubborn love. They saw a low-educated mechanic. They didn't see the man who had rebuilt a whole world with 2 battered hands and a heart that refused to quit. I closed my eyes, letting the cool breeze wash over me. Mason was asleep inside, safe under the same roof that had sheltered him through scraped knees, broken hearts, and teenage rebellions. My boy, my pride, my proof that love didn't need a degree or a pedigree to be real. Tomorrow, the world would keep turning. Maybe it would bring more trouble. Maybe it would bring surprises. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of our little corner of the world, I knew this much. I had chosen to fight for Mason when it mattered most, and I would choose it again, 1,000 times over. Because at the end of it all, love wasn't measured in letters after your name. It was measured in the hands that picked you up when you fell. The arms that carried you home when you couldn't walk. The heart that never, not for a single moment, stopped believing you were worth it. And by that measure, I was the richest man alive. There's a certain pride that comes from building something with your own 2 hands, even when no one else sees it. Our life wasn't made of fine things, but it was real. Every crack in the wall, every squeaky step on the stairs, every mismatched plate in the kitchen cabinets, it all told a story. A story of surviving. Of laughing when there wasn't much to laugh about. Of building a life that was ours. After the custody battle, I was working 2 jobs, days at the factory, nights fixing trucks in the neighbor's garage. Sometimes I'd crawl into bed at 2 in the morning, too tired to even take my boots off. But when Mason would wander into my room in his footy pajamas and climb onto the bed, curling up against me with a sleepy, "Love you, Dad," it made every aching muscle worth it. I didn't know much about raising a kid the right way. Never had a manual. Never had anyone showing me how to do it. My own father had been long gone before I even hit my teens. It was just me, guessing half the time, learning as I went. When Mason had colic and screamed for hours, I paced the floors of our little living room, singing off-key lullabies until he finally slept. When he got older and asked why his mom wasn't here like other kids' moms, I sat him down and told him the truth the only way I knew how, gentle and simple. "She loved you more than anything," I said once, rubbing his back as he blinked up at me with tearful eyes. "And she's watching you every day. You're her best thing." He believed me. And maybe, in some ways, That belief kept both of us going. Money was tight in those years. Real tight. There were days when I skipped dinner just to make sure Mason had enough on his plate. Nights when the electricity company threatened to shut us off. I learned how to stretch $1 so far it could snap. Hand-me-down clothes, used toys from the thrift store, school supplies bought late when they were on clearance. But you know something funny? Mason never once complained. Not when he had to wear sneakers with duct tape on the toes. Not when Christmas meant just one present under the tree. Not when his friends had video games and new bikes and he made do with a football we patched up with shoe glue. Instead, he made me proud in ways I can't even explain. He worked hard at school. He was kind. He helped neighbors rake leaves and shovel snow without being asked. And every time he ran home, sweaty and muddy from playing outside, shouting "Dad," guess what? Like I was the only person in the world he wanted to tell, I knew we were doing just fine. We didn't have a big backyard, but we had enough space for a beat-up old grill and 2 lawn chairs. Every summer, I'd save up for a small camping trip, just me and Mason and a tent that leaked when it rained. We'd fish in muddy rivers, roast marshmallows until they caught fire, and tell ghost stories that made us both laugh too hard to be scared. Those weekends were messy, cheap, and perfect. One night, Mason must have been about 10, we lay under the stars, staring up at the sky. He rolled onto his side and looked at me with a seriousness that didn't match his missing front teeth. "Are we poor, Dad?" he asked. The question hit harder than any punch. I wanted to lie, wanted to tell him we were just like everyone else. But I didn't want to build our life on lies. I thought about it for a second, then said, "We don't have a lot of money, but we're rich in the stuff that matters." He frowned, confused. "Like what?" "Like love. Like laughs. Like always having someone who's got your back." He nodded thoughtfully, like he was storing that answer away somewhere deep inside him. Then he grinned, crooked and full of life. "Then we're the richest people ever." I laughed so hard that night I scared off half the wildlife in the woods. Time kept moving forward, faster than I liked. Mason grew taller, sharper, smarter. He never made me feel small for not knowing the things he was learning in school. Instead, he came home and patiently taught me about algebra, history, and science experiments that half the time ended with the kitchen smelling like burnt sugar. When he made it into college, full scholarship, no less. I stood in the driveway the day he left, pretending I wasn't wiping my eyes on my sleeve. He hugged me so tight my ribs ached. "I'll make you proud, Dad," he whispered. "You already have," I choked out. The house felt empty without him, but I kept busy. Fixed up an old motorcycle I'd been meaning to get running for years. Started volunteering at the local youth center, teaching kids how to work on engines. It felt good to give back a little, to pass on what I knew. Every Sunday, like clockwork, Mason would call. Sometimes from his dorm room, sometimes from the library, once from a rainy street corner because his umbrella broke and he wanted to tell me he aced his chemistry exam. No matter how busy he got, he never forgot where he came from. And then, years later, came the day he called me with shaking excitement in his voice. "Dad," he said, breathless, "I met someone. Claire." At first, I was just happy he was happy. She sounded nice, polite, sweet. Maybe a little polished around the edges, but love smooths out the rough spots, right? I didn't think much of it when Mason said her parents were a little formal. Thought maybe they'd warm up once they got to know us. I didn't realize then how much they saw people like me as invisible, as less than, as something to be tolerated at best and humiliated at worst. Maybe I should have seen it coming. But love has a way of making you believe in the best, even when the warning signs are flashing. Still, no matter what happened at that fancy wedding, no matter what bitter laughter tried to rewrite our story, it couldn't erase the life we built together. A life made of hard work and harder love. A life built with calloused hands, stubborn hearts, and the kind of bond that mockery couldn't even scratch. I sat back in my chair that night, listening to Mason's soft breathing through the thin walls of the house, and smiled. They thought they could measure a man by the clothes he wore or the school he graduated from. They had no idea how rich we really were. Growing up, Mason never made me feel like he was embarrassed of me. Not once. Even when the other kids bragged about what their parents did, lawyers, doctors, business owners, Mason would puff out his chest and tell anyone who listened, "My dad can fix anything." He said it like it was the most important job in the world. And to him, maybe it was. When he got older, I worried it would change. That teenage years and peer pressure would make him see the dirt under my nails or the grease stains on my jeans as something shameful. I braced myself for it, honestly. Waiting for the day, he'd stop inviting me to career days or start hesitating when people asked what his dad did for a living. But that day never came. Instead, I remember the time his high school held a career fair. Kids brought in their parents to talk about what they did. There were engineers and architects and professors with big titles and fancier words than I could follow. I almost told Mason he should pick someone else to stand beside him that day. I didn't want to embarrass him, but he wouldn't hear it. "You're coming, Dad," he said firmly. "You're the smartest man I know." So I went. Wore my best pair of jeans, a clean work shirt, even combed my hair back like Mason used to when he played dress-up as a kid. I stood next to him while he introduced me to his classmates and teachers. "This is my dad," he said, proud as anything. "He's a mechanic. He can fix cars, trucks, lawnmowers, anything with an engine. He even built a go-kart for me from scratch when I was 10. The kids' faces lit up. Some teachers smiled politely, but a few genuinely looked impressed when Mason told them about how we used scrap parts and still made that little go-kart run like a dream. Driving home that night, Mason leaned over and said, "Some dads wear suits, but mine can build things with his hands. That's way cooler." I don't think he realized what that meant to me. Maybe he never will. Even when he left for college, surrounded by kids from rich families with polished backgrounds, he never stopped being proud of where he came from. He'd send pictures of him in his dorm room, grinning like a fool, a poster of a classic Mustang behind him, a car we had rebuilt together one long, greasy summer. Once, during his second year, he brought a few friends home over break. I worried what they'd think of our small house, the cracked driveway, the second-hand furniture. But Mason acted like it was a palace. He showed them the workshop out back where we had spent countless weekends. Told them stories about learning to change oil before he learned to drive. He even pointed proudly at my old recliner in the living room and said, "Best chair in the world." Sat there every night listening to my dad's crazy stories. And when one of his friends joked about the tiny kitchen, Mason just laughed and said, "Yeah, but you've never had burgers better than my dad's." He made me feel like I was 10 feet tall. That's what love does. It doesn't hide you in the shadows. It shines a light on you, even when the rest of the world looks away. Claire entered his life not long after that. I could tell he was head over heels from the start. He talked about her like she was made of sunlight. She was smart, top of her class, working toward a career in international law. Mason couldn't stop grinning whenever he mentioned her. The first time we met, she was polite, a little stiff maybe, but kind enough. I chalked it up to nerves. Not everyone knows what to say to a man who makes his living elbow-deep in engines. Her smile was tight, her words careful, like she was afraid to step in oil just by standing next to me. But Mason looked at her like she hung the moon, and that was enough for me. It wasn't until later, at family gatherings and dinners, that I noticed the small cracks. The way her parents would talk over me at the table, using words meant to confuse or belittle. The way Claire would sometimes wince when I mentioned work, like I had said something uncivilized. The way she introduced me to her friends once, not as Mason's dad, but as the man who fixed our car. Still, I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe I wasn't their kind of people. Maybe they just needed time. Maybe love could smooth it over the way it always had before. But now, looking back after what happened at the wedding, I realize love alone isn't always enough to bridge certain gaps, especially the kind built from pride and prejudice. I remember one particular conversation with Mason about 6 months before the wedding. We were fixing up the porch swing, replacing a few rotten boards. He was hammering away while I held the new slat steady. "You think Claire's parents like me?" he asked, out of nowhere. I shrugged, careful with my words. "They don't know you like I do. Give it time." He nodded, but the furrow between his eyebrows stayed. "Sometimes I think they see me as." "I don't know. Not good enough," he muttered. "More to the nails than to me." I set down the slat and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Listen, son," I said carefully. "Some people are born thinking they're better than others because of where they went to school or how many zeros are on their paycheck. That's their problem, not yours. You measure a man by how he treats the people who can't do anything for him. By his heart, not his wallet." Mason didn't say anything for a long moment, just kept hammering. But his jaw was set, and I could tell he was storing those words away the same way he always did when something mattered. Maybe that's why, on the day of the wedding, when he saw that awful nameplate and heard the laughter, he didn't hesitate. He remembered what mattered. He chose love over appearances. He chose respect over status. He chose me, not because I was the perfect father, not because I had wealth or titles to offer, but because, when everything else was stripped away, money, education, fancy suits, and big houses, what was left was a bond built from years of late nights, early mornings, scraped knees, burned dinners, repaired engines, bedtime stories, and 1,000 little moments of showing up. And sometimes, that's more than enough. Sometimes, it's everything. The Whitmores were the kind of family that wore their pride like armor. Everything about them was polished, rehearsed, and just a little too perfect. From the first time I met them at a dinner party Claire's parents threw, I could feel the difference. They spoke in clipped, proper tones, like every word was a carefully measured performance. They shook hands too firmly, smiled too tightly, and when they talked about their achievements, degrees, investments, business ventures, it wasn't conversation. It was competition. I tried to fit in. God knows, I tried. I showed up in the best clothes I could afford, kept my elbows off the table, minded my manners the way Laura had once taught me. I smiled when they dropped fancy terms about stocks and private equity. I nodded politely when Dr. Whitmore bragged about the prestigious universities in their family line like it was a crown he wore. But no matter what I did, it wasn't enough. They didn't see me as a man who had raised a son through blood, sweat, and broken dreams. They didn't see the father who had stayed up for days to nurse a sick boy back to health, who had learned how to braid hair for school plays, who had taught a child how to ride a bike by running behind him for hours even though his legs screamed with pain. They didn't see love. They saw dirt under my nails and a high school dropout. They saw someone they couldn't parade in their cocktail parties or drop into conversations with their ivory tower friends. Still, I held my tongue. For Mason's sake. I smiled when they talked down to me, laughed when they made jokes that stung, and swallowed my pride like a bitter pill. Because Mason was happy. Because I believed, foolishly maybe, that marriage would build bridges where words had failed. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, there were signs. Small ones. Claire gently suggesting I get a new suit, something more appropriate for the venue. Judith Whitmore offering to arrange a speech coach if I wanted to say a few words at the reception, said with a syrupy sweetness that barely hid the insult. Dr. Whitmore sending me an etiquette book in the mail with a note. A little light reading before the big day. I could have gotten angry. Lord knows, a younger version of me might have thrown those words right back at them. But years of raising Mason had taught me patience. Taught me to pick my battles. I wasn't about to cause a scene and embarrass Mason at his own wedding. So, I tucked my hurt deep inside. I smiled through tight teeth. I told myself that one day, when Mason had a family of his own, when he held his own child in his arms, he'd understand that sometimes love meant swallowing your pride so your kids could have their day. I wore the new suit. Stiff and uncomfortable, it felt like a costume instead of clothing. I practiced my manners. I sat quietly through endless dinners where they discussed vacations I could never afford and schools I could never dream of entering. I endured it all. For Mason. The morning of the wedding, I woke early. Too early. I made a pot of coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring out the window at the sunrise. I thought about Laura, how proud she would have been. I thought about the little boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares and how he was now a grown man about to start his own life. I told myself that today would be about Mason, not about me, not about the Whitmores. I tucked my hands into the pockets of my new suit and whispered to the empty kitchen, "You did good, Laura. We did good." I drove to the venue with my heart in my throat. The ballroom was grander than I had imagined. Glittering chandeliers, gold-trimmed walls, music floating through the air like perfume. Guests in tuxedos and silk dresses floated around like it was some kind of royal ball. I felt like a bull that had wandered into a china shop. Still, I smiled. I shook hands. I let Judith kiss my cheek and pretended not to notice the way she immediately wiped her hand on her dress. I even laughed at Dr. Whitmore's jokes, even though every word dripped with condescension. Then came the moment that shattered it all. I walked to my assigned seat, trying to ignore the sideways glances, the whispers. When I bent down to read the nameplate on my chair, it felt like someone punched the air right out of my chest. Low-educated fake dad. I stared at it, blinking, hoping it would change if I looked long enough. But it didn't. The letters were crisp, deliberate, cruel. The laughter started softly. A titter here, a snicker there. Then it grew. Ugly. Mean. Judith covering her mouth with her hand, but failing to hide the sparkle in her eyes. Dr. Whitmore shaking his head in mock sympathy. I wanted to disappear. Wanted to sink into the marble floor and never be seen again. But before I could move, before the humiliation could finish crushing me, Mason's voice cut through the noise. Dad. I turned. He was standing at the altar, halfway to me, eyes blazing. Let's go home. Without hesitation, he crossed the room, took my arm, and together we walked out. Past the whispers. Past the gasps. Past the perfect people in their perfect clothes with their perfect lives. Claire didn't follow. Judith didn't call out. Dr. Whitmore didn't move. They let us go like we were the ones unworthy. Outside, the sun was blinding. Mason held the car door open for me like he had 100 times before when he was a boy pretending to be a chauffeur. I slid into the passenger seat, my heart too full to speak. He drove in silence for a while, hands tight on the steering wheel. I'm sorry, Dad, he said finally, voice rough. I should have seen it sooner. I shook my head. You saw it when it mattered. At a red light, he turned to me. I don't care about degrees or bank accounts or any of that crap. You're my father. You're my family. Tears burned my eyes, but I blinked them away. That day, I realized something important. Family isn't built in ballrooms or sealed with degrees. It's built in the trenches, one scraped knee, one missed meal, one whispered bedtime story at a time. They could keep their chandeliers and champagne. I had something they would never understand. I had my son's loyalty, and nothing in the world could make me richer than that. The morning after Mason's wedding that wasn't. I woke up before the sun. I couldn't sleep, no matter how tired I was. My mind kept replaying everything from the night before. The mocking laughter, that awful nameplate, the heavy silence as we left the ballroom. I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee that had gone cold in my hands, staring out into the gray light of dawn. The world was still turning. Birds were singing. Somewhere across town, people were waking up to their ordinary lives. But for me, something fundamental had shifted. I wasn't angry, not exactly. I was past anger. What I felt now was something deeper, heavier. A sadness for the way people could twist love into something cruel. I wondered what would happen now. Mason hadn't said much after we got home last night. Just sat on the couch for a long time, staring at nothing. He finally fell asleep sitting up, head tilted against the wall like he had when he was a kid riding in the back seat after a long day. I didn't wake him. I just covered him with a blanket and sat nearby, keeping watch like I always had. I was sipping my second cup of coffee when I heard the rumble of an engine pulling up. I squinted down the driveway and saw Mason's old pickup rolling in, a little battered, a little dusty. It was Theo, his best friend since high school. Theo hopped out, still in his mechanic's uniform, and jogged up to the porch. You seen the news? He asked, panting like he had run the whole way. I frowned. News. Theo shoved his phone at me, the screen already lit up with headlines. Whitmo. I stared at it, unblinking. Below the headline was a photo of Claire's father, Dr. Whitmore, looking grim as reporters crowded around him. Another article headline flashed below it. Sources claim family fortune at risk as authorities move in. My first reaction wasn't joy. It wasn't even satisfaction. It was shock. Theo kept talking, excitement tumbling out of him. Someone leaked a bunch of documents last night, emails, bank statements, internal memos. It's everywhere. The SEC's involved. They're saying Whitmore Industries has been cooking their books for years. I set the phone down slowly. My heart was pounding, but my mind felt strangely calm. Was it karma? Was it justice? I didn't know. All I knew was that the very people who had laughed at me, who had called me a fake, who had tried to make me feel small, they were crumbling under the weight of their own lies. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Mason standing in the doorway, hair sticking up in all directions, blanket still wrapped around his shoulders. What's going on? He mumbled. I exchanged a look with Theo, then handed Mason the phone. He read the headlines, his eyes widening with every word. For a long moment, he said nothing. Just stared at the screen like it was written in a language he didn't understand. Then, slowly, he let out a breath and sank down onto the porch steps. I don't even know what to feel, he said finally. I sat down beside him. You don't have to feel anything right now. Just breathe. Theo clapped him on the shoulder. Better to find out now than later, man. Mason nodded, still staring off into the distance. I almost married into that mess. You didn't, I said quietly. You saw the truth when it mattered. We sat there in silence, the three of us, while the sun crept higher and the world around us started to buzz with life. I could hear the neighbors' sprinklers kicking on. Someone down the street was mowing their lawn. It was just another Saturday for most people. But for us, it was the first day of a different life. Around noon, Mason's phone started blowing up. Calls, texts, voicemails. Some were from Claire. Some were from her parents. Some were from people who had been at the wedding, desperate to know what we knew, if we had been part of the leak. Mason didn't answer a single one. He just sat there, staring at the phone, shaking his head. At one point, he turned to me and said, "Dad, do you think they ever loved me? Or was it always about appearances?" I hated that question. Hated that he even had to ask it. "I think they love the idea of you," I said carefully. "The image. The connection. But real love? Real love doesn't humiliate. It doesn't mock. It doesn't care about where you came from or what you wear or what you do for a living. It shows up when you fall. It holds on when things get ugly." Mason swallowed hard. "I don't think they ever really saw me. They didn't deserve to," I said simply. In the afternoon, the news got worse for the Whitmores. More documents surfaced. Anonymous sources came forward. Former employees spoke to the press. It was a tidal wave, and no matter how hard they tried to spin it, they were drowning. Theo eventually left to get back to work. Mason and I stayed on the porch, watching it all unfold from a battered old laptop he set up on the table between us. At one point, we saw a live clip of Dr. Whitmore being swarmed by reporters outside his office. His face was pale, drawn, nothing like the smug man who had smirked at me across the ballroom just a day before. Judith was there too, clutching her pearls like they could save her. Claire wasn't visible in the crowd. Maybe she was hiding. Maybe she was just smart enough to stay away. Mason watched for a few minutes, then closed the laptop with a sigh. "I don't want anything from them," he said. "Not their money. Not their apologies. Nothing." "You don't need anything from them," I said. "You've got everything you need right here." He looked at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw peace in his eyes. Maybe not happiness yet, but peace. That night, we grilled burgers in the backyard. Just the two of us. No fancy dishes. No white tablecloths. Just two plates balanced on our knees, ketchup dripping down our fingers, laughter filling the warm summer air. We didn't talk about the Whitmores. We didn't talk about the wedding. We just talked about life. About dreams. About the future. Mason told me he was thinking about starting his own business. Something simple, something honest. Maybe a garage of his own. Maybe teaching kids how to work on cars, the way I had taught him. I told him I thought that sounded just about perfect. As the stars came out overhead, I realized something important. The storm had passed, and even though the world had tried to tear us down, even though the laughter still echoed faintly in the back of my mind, it didn't matter anymore. We were still standing, still together, still undefeated. The next few days passed like a blur, but underneath it all, something kept pulling at me. A memory. A secret that I had tucked away so tightly even Mason didn't know about it. It started years ago, after Laura passed. Right around the time I won custody of Mason. I didn't have much, an old house, an older truck, a few $1,000s Laura's life insurance had left behind. It wasn't enough to live comfortably. Not by a long shot. But it was something, and I knew I had to make it count. One afternoon, when Mason was still in diapers, I walked into a community center that offered free financial advice for low-income families. I didn't know anything about stocks or investments. I barely understood savings accounts. But I sat through every workshop, read every battered pamphlet they handed me, and asked 1,000 questions. I wanted to be ready for anything life threw at us. It was there I learned about investing small amounts into companies. Not big flashy gambling. Smart, patient investing. Little by little, year after year. And funny enough, one of the companies I had put a small chunk of Laura's insurance money into was Whitmore Industries. Back then, they weren't the giant they became later. Just another mid-sized manufacturing company. Their stock was cheap, their prospects decent. I figured why not? It wasn't a fortune, just a few $100s here and there. Enough that, over the years, as Whitmore Industries grew into a giant, so did my shares. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding it, but because it didn't seem important. It was just a quiet thing I did in the background, like fixing the leaky faucet or making sure Mason had enough money for school books. By the time Mason went to college, I had accumulated a surprising number of shares, enough to be considered what they called a minor silent investor. Not enough to sit on their board or throw weight around, but enough that when I sold them, someone would notice. I hadn't touched those shares in years. They just sat there, quietly growing, like a tree planted in a forgotten field, until the night of the wedding. When I saw that nameplate, when I heard the laughter, something in me snapped. Not in anger, not in revenge. In clarity. The people who sat there, mocking me, thought I was nothing. They didn't know I owned a small part of the empire they bragged about. They didn't know that with one phone call, I could make their comfortable little world tilt sideways. So I did. I waited until Mason and I got home, waited until he had fallen asleep on the couch, blanket pulled up to his chin like he was a boy again. Then I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out the old laptop I barely used anymore, and logged into my investment account. There they were, hundreds of shares. Enough to matter. I didn't hesitate. I clicked sell. I didn't just sell them to the market. I directed them to a competitor I had researched months earlier, a company that had been waiting for the right moment to strike. The transfer went through in less than 20 minutes. By morning, it would be done, and I would be free of them. I didn't do it to destroy them. Honestly, that wasn't even my first thought. I did it because I realized I didn't owe them anything. Not my silence. Not my respect. Not my investment in their future. They had already decided what I was worth. They forgot to check who was holding part of their house up. The next morning, the fallout began. News outlets sniffed out the sale quickly. Speculation ran wild. People panicked. Stocks plummeted. Investigations kicked up dust the Whitmores had spent years trying to sweep under expensive rugs. It was chaos. Beautiful, ugly chaos. And all the while, I said nothing. Mason didn't know. No one did. It was my quiet goodbye to people who never deserved a hello. I watched it all unfold with a strange calm. No gloating. No fist pumping. Just the same steady feeling I had whenever I finished fixing an engine. Satisfaction that the work was done, that the gears had turned the way they were supposed to. One night, a few days after the collapse started, Mason and I sat on the porch again. We hadn't said much about the Whitmores lately. It was like we had both agreed, without speaking, to let the past stay where it was. But that night, Mason turned to me with a frown. "You ever feel bad?" he asked. "That they're losing everything?" I thought about it for a long minute. "No," I said finally. "Because what they built was hollow. It was built on lies. On hurting people smaller than them. It was always going to fall. They just didn't think it would happen so soon." Mason nodded, staring out at the stars. "You think Claire knew?" he asked after a while. I shrugged. "Maybe. Maybe not. Doesn't change anything." He sat quietly, shoulders hunched like he was carrying something heavy. I reached over and clapped a hand on his back. "You don't owe them anything, Mason," I said. "Not your guilt. Not your regret. Sometimes, when a house catches fire, it's not your job to run back inside." He let out a shaky breath. I wanted it to be real, you know? The love. The family. All of it. "I know, son," I said softly. "And it will be. One day. With someone who doesn't need to measure your worth before they decide to love you." We sat in silence after that. Comfortable. Steady. Like two stones in a river, weathered but unmovable. Inside the house, the old clock ticked on. The world turned. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we were exactly where we were supposed to be. A week later, I officially closed my investment account. Sold off the rest of the small pieces I'd gathered over the years. I didn't need them anymore. Didn't need the security blanket. We had something better. We had each other. And we had freedom. Sometimes, it's the unseen hands that shape the world the most. The ones nobody notices. The ones the rich and powerful laugh at, dismiss, or forget. Until those hands quietly let go. And everything they thought was unshakable starts to fall. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their apology. I didn't even need them to know it was me. The only thing I needed was already sitting beside me on that porch. A son who had chosen me. And a life that no amount of money could ever replace. Life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. After everything that happened. The wedding disaster, the collapse of Whitmore Industries, the endless stream of news articles painting Claire's family in a new, uglier light, I thought Mason might be broken for a long time. Thought he might wall himself off, become hard and bitter like some men do after betrayal. But that's not the kind of man Mason was raised to be. Slowly, like the first stubborn buds pushing through frozen soil, he started to heal. It began with small things. He got up early again. Started fixing things around the house without being asked. Changed the oil in the truck. Painted the porch railing. Little tasks that might have seemed meaningless to someone else, but meant the world to me. They meant he was choosing life over anger. Movement over bitterness. One morning, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with a pile of notebooks and a laptop spread out in front of him. "What's all this?" I asked, pouring myself a coffee. He looked up, his eyes brighter than I'd seen them in weeks. I'm thinking about starting my own garage, Dad. I blinked. Your own business? He nodded. Not just repairs. Teaching too. Classes for high school kids who want to learn a trade. Apprenticeships. Real work with real skills. Pride surged so fast in my chest it almost knocked me over. That's a damn good idea, son, I said, smiling so wide my cheeks hurt. He grinned back, a little sheepishly. Figured it was about time I started building something real. Something that matters. Over the next few weeks, Mason threw himself into planning. He found an old building on the edge of town, an abandoned mechanic's shop with cracked windows and a roof that needed fixing. It was a mess, but it had good bones, just like Mason. Strong, steady, built to last. I helped him every step of the way. We patched drywall, replaced broken tiles, cleaned out years of dust and grime. Some nights we worked until midnight, covered in paint and sweat, laughing about how sore we'd be in the morning. But there was joy in the work, a kind of sacred satisfaction that money couldn't buy. And somewhere along the way, something even better happened. Mason met Leah. It wasn't some grand movie moment with fireworks and slow motion running across a field. It was simpler than that. Realer. She worked at the hardware store where Mason and I made what felt like 100 trips every week. Short woman, big brown eyes, calluses on her hands from working the floor. No makeup, no airs. Just a bright laugh and a way of talking that made you feel like you mattered. I saw it happen almost in slow motion. One afternoon, Mason was arguing with the clerk about the difference between two brands of sealant when Leah stepped in, patiently explained the difference, and gave Mason a smile that turned him into a stammering fool. That night, he couldn't stop talking about her. She's smart, Dad, he said, practically glowing. She knows more about tools than I do. I just smiled and said, sounds like you finally met your match. It didn't take long. A few coffee dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into long walks through the park. Long walks turned into nights when Mason came home humming under his breath like a man with a brand new song in his heart. He brought her over to dinner a month later. I made my famous burgers on the grill, and we ate out back under the stars. Leah fit right in, laughing at our terrible jokes, teasing Mason about how he still couldn't remember the difference between a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver. But what struck me most was how she looked at him. Not like he was surprised to be one. Not like he was a stepping stone to a better life. She looked at him like he was already enough. And for a man who had spent too many months questioning his worth, that look was everything. Later that night, after Leah had gone home and Mason and I were cleaning up, he turned to me, shy and serious. I think she's the one, Dad. I clapped a hand on his shoulder. You'll know. When the time's right, you'll know. And he did. 3 months later, Mason proposed. Nothing fancy. No flash mobs or choreographed dances. Just a quiet evening in the little shop he was still fixing up, kneeling on one dusty knee with a simple ring and a heart full of hope. Leah said yes before he even finished the question. The wedding was a small affair. Backyard, under the old oak tree that Mason used to climb as a boy. Close friends, a few neighbors, Theo as the best man. No fancy nameplates. No marble halls. No one cared about degrees or income brackets. All that mattered was the laughter that filled the air and the tears that filled my eyes as I watched my son marry a woman who saw him for everything he was and nothing he wasn't. When they exchanged vows, Mason didn't talk about wealth or appearances. He talked about loyalty, about late nights fixing broken things together, about love built through work and patience and stubborn hope. When it was over and Mason and Leah danced barefoot in the grass, I sat back in a lawn chair, a cold beer in my hand, and felt a peace deeper than any I'd ever known. We had come full circle. From a courtroom where I fought to keep my son, to a ballroom where they tried to laugh me away, to a backyard where real love finally stood tall and proud. Later that night, Mason found me sitting on the porch steps, watching the stars. He dropped down beside me, still in his wedding clothes, tie loose, hair a mess from all the dancing. Thanks for everything, Dad, he said quietly. You did this yourself, son, I replied. You built this life. You chose it. He shook his head. I wouldn't have known how to choose it if you hadn't shown me first. For a long moment, neither of us said anything. Just sat there, shoulder to shoulder, the night wrapping around us like a blanket. And I realized something. The battles I had fought, the humiliation, the sacrifices, the loneliness, they had all been worth it. Every scraped knuckle, every sleepless night, every whispered prayer when I didn't know how we were going to make it. Because they led to this. To a son who knew what real love looked like. and a life richer than any fortune could buy. Sometimes I sit on the porch in the evenings, a cold drink in my hand, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. I rock slowly in my old chair, the wood creaking under my weight, and I think about the life I built, not with bricks or blueprints, but with hands that stayed steady when the storms came. I watch Mason through the open window, inside the house he helped rebuild with Leah. Their twins, Lily and Jack, tumble across the living room floor, a blur of giggles and tiny socked feet. Leah chases them, laughing breathlessly, while Mason pretends to be a growling bear, crawling after them on all fours. Their home is simple, like mine always was. No grand chandeliers, no marble floors. Just a place built with love, patched with patience, and filled with a laughter so real it hums in your bones. Every so often, Mason glances out the window at me, grins, and waves. I wave back, feeling something settle deep inside me, something stronger than pride, deeper than satisfaction. Peace. Years ago, when Claire's family tried to shame me at that wedding, I thought maybe they had stolen something from me. Maybe they had left a mark that would never heal. But now, looking at the life Mason and Leah have made, I realize the truth. They didn't steal anything. They only revealed what had been strong all along. Family isn't measured by titles, or wealth, or the kind of degrees you hang on the wall. It's measured by who shows up, who stays, who loves you when loving you isn't fashionable. It's measured by scraped knees kissed better, by broken hearts patiently mended, by old trucks kept running longer than they should. It's measured by two tired hands that built a life out of nothing but grit and a whole lot of stubborn hope. I lean back in the chair and close my eyes for a moment, letting the evening breeze brush against my face. I think about Laura, about the promises we made when we were young and reckless and thought we had all the time in the world. I like to believe she's still watching, somewhere beyond the clouds, smiling at the life we carved out of heartbreak and hard days. I imagine her sitting beside me now, laughing that soft laugh she always had, reaching over to squeeze my. You both did good. Sometimes Mason comes out after the kids are in bed, carrying 2 beers. He'll sit beside me, stretching his long legs out in front of him, and we'll talk about nothing and everything. About how Jack thinks he's a dinosaur, about how Lily refuses to go to sleep unless she hears 3 bedtime stories in a row, about how scary it is to raise kids, to wonder if you're doing it right, to worry you're making mistakes you can't see yet. I get scared sometimes, Dad, he admitted once, staring up at the stars. Scared I'll mess it all up. I chuckled low in my throat, took a slow sip of my drink, and said, "Welcome to being a parent." He laughed, shaking his head. "But you made it look easy." I turned to look at him then, at the strong, kind man he had become. "It wasn't easy," I said. "Not for a single minute. I just loved you enough to make it through." That's the secret no one tells you about family, about life. It's not about getting everything right. It's not about never falling down. It's about getting back up. Every single time. About showing up even when you're tired, even when you're scared, even when you don't have a clue what you're doing. It's about loving so hard that all the broken pieces start to fit together in new ways. And sitting there beside my son, under a sky full of stars, I realized something else. The Whitmores had laughed at me once, called me a low-educated fake dad, tried to paint me as less than. But none of that mattered anymore. Because while their empire crumbled, while their carefully constructed lives unraveled in headlines and courtrooms, my life was here, alive, breathing, growing stronger every day. Not perfect, not polished, but real. Mason built his garage up from the ground. It's a small place with grease-stained floors and a giant hand-painted sign that reads, "Cooper's Garage. Honest work, honest people." Every day, kids from the high school come by after classes to learn how to fix engines, change oil, patch tires. Mason teaches them with the same patience I once taught him. Leah runs the front office, twins strapped to her hips more often than not, managing invoices and ordering parts with a baby on each arm. Sometimes when I visit, the kids call me Mr. Cooper or Coach and ask me to show them tricks on old carburetors. I teach them everything I know, just like I did with Mason. Watching them grin with grease on their faces, I realized that somehow, without even planning it, we built something bigger than just a life. We built a legacy, a place where kids who felt overlooked could find pride in their hands, in their skills, in the knowledge that they mattered. And Mason, he stands at the heart of it all. Not because of a fancy name, not because of a silver spoon, because he knows what real value looks like, because he was raised on it. One night, after a long day at the shop, Mason found me again on the porch. He sat down beside me without a word, handed me a cold beer, and stared out at the field stretching under the moonlight. After a while, he spoke. "Thanks for fighting for me, Dad. For everything." I clinked my bottle against his and said, "Always." Because that's what real fathers do. They show up. They stay. They love even when it's hard, when it's messy, when the world tells them they're not enough. They prove the world wrong, not with speeches or money or shiny things, but with the simple, stubborn act of being there. And tonight, as I sit here rocking under the wide-open sky, I know that no matter what the world tried to say about me, I was never a fake father. I was never low anything. I was a real man, a real father, and I had built a life that no laughter, no cruelty, no nameplate could ever erase. I should have known this was coming. In fact, I did know. The second I received the invitation to my brother Nathan's wedding, I felt the familiar weight settle on my chest. It wasn't an invitation, it was a summons. A carefully crafted script where everyone had a role, where Nathan was the golden child, and I was the family disgrace. But I came anyway, not out of hope, not because I longed to be accepted, not even because I wanted to support my brother. I came because I had a plan. But before we get to that, let me tell you how we got here. I walk into the Grand Belmont Ballroom, one of the most luxurious event spaces in the city. A crystal chandelier dangles from the ceiling like an elaborate reminder of just how much wealth my family wields. Tables are lined with golden plates, white flowers, and the finest wine money can buy. Everything is extravagant, excessive, exactly what Nathan and my parents, Charles and Rebecca, live for. I take a slow breath, steadying myself. I don't belong here. I never have. Ryan. The voice cuts through the air like a blade. I turn to see my mother, Rebecca, standing near the entrance. Her gold-sequined gown hugs her thin frame, her hair styled to perfection, not a strand out of place. She looks me over, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You could have dressed up a little more," she says, her tone laced with disappointment. I glance down at my navy blue suit, modest, neat, nothing flashy. Didn't realize there was a dress code. I reply, keeping my voice neutral. She hums, a sound of disapproval. "Well, at least you showed up. Try not to make a scene." With that, she turns and disappears into the crowd. Try not to make a scene. It's funny, really. As if I've ever been the one causing problems. As if I've ever been the one looking for attention. I navigate through the sea of socialites, investors, and family friends, exchanging half-hearted nods and forced smiles. I know exactly why I was invited, to be paraded as a cautionary tale. The black sheep, the disgrace. And soon, they'll make sure everyone remembers that. I reach table 14, tucked far from the main family table, surrounded by distant relatives and acquaintances. A strategic placement. Keep me out of sight. Keep me out of mind. A waiter fills my glass with champagne. I grip the stem, letting the coolness settle in my fingers. Then, the lights dim. The music fades. A spotlight shines on the giant screen at the front of the ballroom. Nathan stands up from the head table, microphone in hand. He's beaming, his tuxedo crisp, his smile as rehearsed as ever. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he begins, his voice smooth, charming. "It means the world to have our closest friends and family celebrate this special day with us. And as a treat, I've put together a little presentation, some memories, some laughs, some love." Applause. Excitement. I take a slow sip of my drink. I know where this is going. The screen flickers to life. First, there are pictures of Nathan and his new bride, Julia. Their relationship, their travels, their achievements. The crowd oohs and ahs at every frame. Then, pictures of Nathan and our parents. Nathan's first baseball game. Nathan graduating from Harvard. Nathan at his first real estate deal. Nathan shaking hands with business moguls. Nathan, Nathan, Nathan. Always the golden boy. And then, the slideshow changes. A picture of me appears on the screen. The caption beneath it is bold, unmistakable. Infertile, divorced failure, high school dropout, low income, single. For a moment, the room is silent. Then laughter. A wave of cruel, uncontrollable laughter. Nathan grins, eating it up. Come on, don't laugh too hard, he says, his voice dripping with mockery. He might cry. My mother sips her wine. My father, Charles, chuckles. And my ex-wife, Olivia, smirks. The laughter rolls through the crowd like a storm. I hear snickers from distant cousins. A whispered pathetic from an old family friend. Someone clinking their glass in mock celebration. I sit there still, silent. My fingers tighten around my phone. Not yet, Ryan. Not yet. I can feel eyes on me. Watching. Waiting for a reaction. Waiting for me to break. Waiting for me to confirm everything they've ever said about me. But I don't break. Because what they don't know is that this is exactly what I was counting on. Nathan keeps talking, but I barely hear him. His words blend into the background noise of my pounding heart, the static in my veins. I glance at the screen one last time, committing the image to memory. And then, I take out my phone. I press a button. My voice is calm. Even. Begin. The room goes silent. It happens almost immediately. The screen flickers, glitches. The slideshow stops. And then, a new image takes its place. Bold white letters fill the screen, glowing under the spotlight. Breaking free live. The reality of emotional abuse by family. The laughter dies instantly. Confusion sweeps through the room like a cold wind. I watch as my mother lowers her wine glass. My father stiffens. Olivia frowns. Nathan's confident smile falters. People begin whispering, shifting uncomfortably in their seats. And then, a notification pops up in the corner of the screen. Live viewers, 200, 000, 400, 000, 600, 000. The numbers climb rapidly. And then, a message appears, bold and unmistakable. A comment from Olivia's fiancé. The evidence is gathered. The legal team is standing by. You are not alone anymore. I look up, meeting Nathan's stunned gaze. For the first time in my life, I see it. Fear. Real, undeniable fear. I exhale steady and slow. Let's begin, shall we? And just like that, the power shifts. For the first time in my life, I hold the mic. The irony is, for years, they thought I was nothing. And maybe, at one point, I believed it too. After all, when the people who are supposed to love you constantly remind you of your failures, it's easy to start believing them. It's easy to accept that maybe you are the worthless, weak, good-for-nothing disappointment they say you are. For a long time, I let their words define me. I let Nathan's success overshadow me. I let my father's disapproval shape me. I let my mother's cold indifference break me. And worst of all, I let Olivia betray me, take everything, and still convince me it was somehow my fault. But not anymore. Because what they don't know, what they never even bothered to ask about, is that I stopped being the failure they painted me as a long time ago. And tonight, they're about to learn exactly who I've become. The life they never knew. To my family, I am a low-income, divorced office clerk barely scraping by in a dead-end job. That's the version of me they chose to believe. But in reality, I run Breaking Free, a global online community dedicated to emotional abuse survivors. What started as a simple anonymous blog 3 years ago has grown into a YouTube channel with millions of followers, a nonprofit organization with real-world impact, and an entire movement helping people escape toxic environments, just like the one I grew up in. And they have no idea. My father, Charles Carter, built his real estate empire from the ground up. My mother, Rebecca Carter, cemented herself in high society as a woman of grace and influence. My brother, Nathan Carter, followed in their footsteps, Harvard-educated, wealthy, engaged to a woman from another powerful family. They are the perfect Carter family. And I am the stain. They never once asked about my life. They never once wondered what I was doing with my time. They never once checked to see if I had something of value to offer the world. And because they never cared to know, they never saw what I was building. They never saw the thousands of survivors who found strength through my videos. They never saw the letters I received from people who left abusive households because of my guidance. They never saw the conference stages I stood on, speaking about emotional resilience. They never saw the best-selling book I published under a pseudonym, the one that became a lifeline for so many who had been told, just like me, that they were nothing. They never saw me. And tonight, for the first time, they're about to see me in a way they never have before. the plan I've been waiting to unleash. I didn't just walk into this wedding reception unprepared. I spent 2 years gathering evidence, recordings, emails, financial statements, all of it. I worked with lawyers, therapists, and experts in emotional abuse to build a solid case. I connected with people from my online community, many of whom knew this exact kind of pain, many of whom were watching me live right now. I didn't just come here to take a stand. I came here to win. And as I glanced down at my phone screen, watching the viewer count skyrocket, I feel something I haven't felt in years. Power. Not the kind that comes from money, status, or manipulation, the kind my family worships, but the kind that comes from knowing your truth, from standing in your own strength, from no longer being afraid. The first signs of panic. The shift in energy is palpable. People are staring at the giant screen behind Nathan, trying to understand what's happening. I see my father's jaw tighten, his fingers gripping his glass of scotch. I see my mother's posture stiffen, her eyes darting toward my phone as if she already knows this is my doing. I see Nathan's grin fade, confusion flickering across his face before something else takes its place, unease. And then, the first message pops up on the screen. Live viewers, 850,000. 1 million. 1.2 million. Gasps ripple through the room. I hear whispers. What the hell is this? Why is this broadcasting live? But I'm not looking at them. I'm looking at Olivia. She's staring at the screen now, her expression unreadable. And then she sees it. The notification. A comment, highlighted in bold, from her fiancé. The evidence is gathered. The legal team is standing by. You are not alone anymore. Her face drains of color so fast I think she might faint. I tilt my head slightly, watching her reaction. She turns toward me, lips slightly parted. Ryan, what did you do? I don't respond. I simply raise my glass in a slow, deliberate toast. And then, for the first time all night, I smile. The truth will be heard. The murmurs grow louder. People are pulling out their phones, watching the live stream unfold in real time. The screen flickers, and a new message appears. Welcome to Breaking Free Live, the reality of emotional abuse by family. Nathan, still clutching the microphone, finally speaks. What the hell is going on? His voice isn't as confident anymore. I lean forward slightly, tapping my fingers against my champagne glass. I thought you liked presentations, Nathan, I say casually. You worked so hard to humiliate me with yours. I figured it was only fair I show the audience a different side of our family. His face hardens. This isn't funny, Ryan. I arch an eyebrow. Oh, I agree. It's not funny at all. I glance at the screen. Then, with a single tap on my phone, I start the first recording. The beginning of the end. He's just weak. He never had what it takes to be a Carter. We should have cut him off years ago. The voice booms through the venue speakers. Charles Carter's voice. My father. The room goes deathly silent. I take my time watching their reactions. Rebecca's hand tightens around her wine glass. Nathan's fingers curl around the microphone, his knuckles turning white. Olivia flinches. My father. Oh, my father finally looks worried. The silence stretches. Then I press play on the next recording. Ryan is a disappointment. He's infertile, he's weak, he's a failure. I don't even know why we still invite him to family events. Nathan's voice. I turn to him, watching the sweat bead on his forehead. You were saying? I ask. Nathan takes a step toward me, his voice low, dangerous. Turn it off. Now. I tilt my head. Why? Are you ashamed? You weren't ashamed when you said it. He lunges for me. But I don't move. Because I don't have to. Not when I have 1.5 million people watching. Not when I hold all the power now. And as I look around the room, at the cracks forming in their perfect world, I know one thing for certain. They will never silence me again. I always wondered what it would feel like to hold the power in this family. To sit in a room full of people who spent their lives belittling me, ignoring me, and dismissing me, and watch their world shatter in real time. Now I know. And let me tell you, it feels incredible. The room falls apart. The second my father's voice blares through the speakers, the energy in the ballroom shifts. I watch it unfold like a slow-motion car crash. Nathan's expression darkens, his confident smirk replaced by something else, something dangerously close to fear. My mother, Rebecca, stiffens, her hand frozen midair as she sets down her wine glass. Olivia is gripping the tablecloth so tightly her knuckles have turned white. And my father, the great Charles Carter, The man who always controls the room. Looks like he's about to be sick. The guests are murmuring now. I hear scattered whispers. What the hell is this? Did Charles really say that? Are we being recorded? My phone buzzes in my palm. The live stream counter surges. 1.6 million viewers. 1.7 million. 2 million. This isn't just a scandal. This is a public execution. And I'm the one holding the blade. Nathan's panic sets in. Nathan slams his microphone down and storms toward me, his expensive wedding tuxedo wrinkling with every frantic step. Ryan. His voice is raw with rage. Turn that off. I look at him, tilting my head slightly, like I'm genuinely considering it. Then I smirk. Why? Feeling exposed. His jaw clenches. You don't know what you're doing. I lean back in my chair, tapping my fingers lazily against my phone. Oh, I know exactly what I'm doing, little brother. I'm just wondering how long you can keep up the act before the bride walks out. That does it. Nathan lunges for me. But I don't move. Because I don't need to. Security gets to him before he reaches me. 2 men in sleek black suits grab him by the arms, stopping him mid-charge. You're embarrassing yourself, Nathan. I say, keeping my voice steady. That's my job, remember? The crowd erupts in scattered gasps. Nathan struggles against the guards, his face red with rage. You smug little. I press another button. And the next recording begins. Rebecca Carter's cold truth. Ryan was a mistake. It's my mother's voice this time. Rebecca Carter. The woman who spent her whole life curating the perfect image, the perfect family, the perfect lies, is suddenly the center of attention in the worst way possible. We should have never had him. He's nothing like Nathan. Nathan is strong. Nathan is successful. Ryan is just pathetic. The room erupts into chaos. I hear someone drop their glass. A sharp shattering sound follows. A few guests gasp, others stare at my mother in horror. But the best reaction? Julia, Nathan's bride-to-be. Her jaw is clenched. Her hands are trembling at her sides. She turns to my mother, voice deadly calm. You said that about your own son? Rebecca blinks rapidly, her breath shaky. That was taken out of context. Oh, it gets better, I interrupt. Let's hear what she said about Julia, shall we? Rebecca snaps her head toward me. Ryan, don't you dare. I press play. The bride learns the truth. I don't care about that girl. She's just a pretty little pawn for Nathan to marry. A social climb. The silence is deafening. Julia stares at the screen, then at Nathan, then at Rebecca. Her hands are shaking. You used me, she whispers. Nathan shakes his head, reaching for her. Baby, no. She's twisting it. Julia slaps his hand away. The crowd erupts again. Are you serious right now? She hisses. Your entire family treats people like disposable pawns, and you expect me to just go along with it. Nathan is visibly sweating. It's not like that. It is exactly like that. I cut in. Welcome to the Carter family, Julia. If you think they actually care about you, you're more naive than I thought. She takes a step back from him. You're a fraud, Nathan, she breathes. And your family is disgusting. She rips off her engagement ring and throws it at his chest. I'm done. The ring clatters onto the floor. Nathan stands frozen, stunned. And the wedding? Over. Charles Carter falls. I barely have time to enjoy the moment before my father finally snaps. Enough. Charles roars, slamming his hands onto the table. The entire ballroom flinches. He glares at me, his face red, his eyes burning with pure hatred. You think this makes you powerful? He seethes. You think ruining your family's reputation makes you a man? I look him dead in the eye. No, I say, voice steady. I think surviving you made me a man. The guests are no longer whispering. They are watching, waiting. I stand up from my chair. Then I press one final button. The final blow. Charles Carter has been under investigation for financial fraud for the past 6 months. The room erupts into chaos. I can barely hear over the collective gasps, the murmurs, the panic. On the screen, emails, transactions, and leaked documents flood in, evidence of my father's illegal dealings. My father's face turns a sickening shade of pale. The last time I saw him look this terrified, I was 10 years old, clutching a school report card with a single B+ on it. He had called me useless, a disgrace, a stain on the Carter name. Now he's the disgrace. Now he's the failure. And I'm just getting started. The aftermath begins. The wedding is officially ruined. Nathan's fiancée has walked out. My mother is humiliated beyond repair. My father is facing legal and financial collapse. And me? I'm walking out of this ballroom with my head held high. I glance down at my phone one last time. 2.5 million viewers. That's 2.5 million people who finally know the truth. I exhale slowly, feeling something I never thought I'd feel. Relief. For the first time in my life, I am not the failure. For the first time in my life, I am free. And as I turn to leave, my father shouts after me. One last attempt to control me. Ryan, if you walk out that door, you're dead to this family. I pause. Then, without turning around, I say the words I should have said years ago. I was dead to you a long time ago. And with that, I step into the night, never looking back. I walk away from the wreckage of my brother's wedding reception, but I'm not done. Not yet. Destroying the illusion of my family's perfection was only step one. Now it's time for something else. Justice. For years, they have mocked me, humiliated me, and discarded me like I was nothing more than an afterthought. Tonight, I make sure they never forget my name. The calm before the storm. The ballroom is in chaos. Nathan is standing alone, his tuxedo wrinkled, his ex-fiancée's engagement ring still lying on the floor where she threw it. My father, Charles, is red-faced and seething, barely keeping himself together as his business associates begin to step away from him. My mother, Rebecca, has her hand over her mouth, eyes darting around the room, looking for an escape. I could walk away now. I could let the damage settle, let them spend the next weeks trying to piece their shattered reputations back together. But that wouldn't be enough, because there's one last lie that still needs to be unraveled, and I know exactly how to do it. I turn around, stepping back into the ballroom. The murmurs die instantly as I reappear. Nathan sees me first. His face twists with hatred, but there's something else in his eyes now. Fear. Good. I walk back toward my seat, pick up my champagne glass, and take a slow sip before I speak. Now that we've taken a little intermission, I say, voice steady, let's get to the main event. Nobody moves. I press a button on my phone, and the next recording begins. Olivia's dirty secret. I never loved Ryan. He was just convenient. The room goes completely silent. I don't even need to look to know that Olivia, my ex-wife, has just gone pale. The recording continues. I mean, come on. He's infertile. He's weak. I needed a man who could actually give me a future. Someone like Nathan. Gasps ripple through the guests. I turn to my brother, and I smile. You know, I say, swirling the champagne in my glass. I always wondered why Olivia seemed so comfortable at our family gatherings. Nathan stiffens. His eyes dart to Olivia. My mother inhales sharply. My father? His expression hardens, but he doesn't say a word. Because he knows. The betrayal wasn't just my wife. It was all of them. The next message pops up on the screen. A text conversation between Olivia and Nathan. Olivia, I hate sneaking around, baby. I wish we didn't have to hide it. Nathan, just hold on a little longer. Ryan will break soon. He's too weak to fight back. Olivia, I don't even care if he finds out. He's pathetic. He'll just blame himself like always. Nathan, I know. That's why it's so easy. I let the words sink in. Let the reality settle over the room like a heavy fog. My mother shakily lowers her wine glass. My father finally speaks. You slept with your brother's wife? His voice is low. Dangerous. Nathan opens his mouth, but no words come out. And Olivia? She looks like she wants to vanish. The final blow. I should feel pain. I should feel betrayed. But the truth is, I've known for a while. I just wanted to hear them admit it. I lean forward, resting my arms on the table. So tell me, I say casually, was it worth it? Nathan finally snaps. This is ridiculous, he shouts. You're just trying to ruin my life because you're jealous. Jealous? I repeat, raising an eyebrow. Of what? Your failed engagement? Your crumbling reputation? Your fraud business? Nathan slams his fists on the table. You don't deserve to be here, he snarls. You've always been pathetic. You're nothing. You'll always be nothing. I smirk. And then I play the last recording. The lie about my infertility. Ryan isn't infertile. Silence. A slow, building silence as the words register. The doctors said he was fine, but we had to make sure people saw Nathan as the stronger one. Ryan could never be allowed to be an equal. It had to be Nathan. It was always Nathan. It's my father's voice. I turn to Charles, watching as his entire world crumbles. And for the first time ever, he has nothing to say. My mother looks physically ill. Nathan? He looks like he might pass out. The guests are no longer just murmuring. They are staring at the Carters like they are something rotten, something grotesque. Because they are. Breaking the final chains. I take another sip of champagne. And then, I finally stand up. For years, I say, voice steady. You told me I was a failure. I gesture toward the guests. You told everyone that I was the disgrace of this family. I look at my father. That I wasn't strong enough. I turn to my mother. That I wasn't worth loving. I lock eyes with Nathan. That I wasn't even a real man. Then I smirk. And yet, here we are. I point at the screen, the evidence, the truth. Tell me, Nathan, who's the failure now? The aftermath. Olivia grabs her purse and bolts. Nathan stumbles back, staring at the ground. My mother wipes her hands over her face, silent for once in her life. My father? He just sits there, beaten, defeated. And I walk toward the exit. Not as the failure, not as the outcast, but as the man who finally set himself free. I step outside, inhale the cold night air, and let the past slip off my shoulders like a heavy coat. For the first time, I don't carry their words with me. For the first time, I am truly free. And as I look at my phone, watching the viewer count climb past 3 million, I smile. Because this time, the whole world finally knows the truth. I should be done. I should walk away, let the weight of their shame collapse on them like an avalanche, and disappear into the night. But there's one last lie that needs to be burned to the ground before I leave this place for good. The biggest lie of all. The one they used to humiliate me, belittle me, make me feel less than a man. My supposed infertility. And now, with the entire room in shambles, my mother in silent shock, my father completely paralyzed, and my brother standing alone in the ruins of his wedding, I finally deliver the final truth. And this one is going to sting. A lifetime of lies. For years, they weaponized it against me. Ryan can't even give his wife a child. What's the point of a man like that? No wonder Olivia left him. What kind of woman would stay with a broken man? It's a shame. It's a stain on our family's name. Over and over, they said it. Whispered it at family gatherings. Let it slip at public events. Threw it in my face whenever they wanted to remind me how much of a failure I was. They made me believe it. And I let them. Because when you grow up in a house where your voice means nothing, where you are always the mistake, the afterthought, the lesser one, you stop questioning what they tell you. You just accept it as fact. Until one day, you don't. Until one day, you wake up, get tested, and find out the truth. Until one day, you realize they were lying the entire time. And not just lying. They were hiding the real truth. The truth comes out. I step forward, letting the tension in the room build. The screen behind me flashes with the next document. A medical report. The heading is bold, crisp, impossible to ignore. Patient, Ryan Carter. Fertility assessment. Results. No issues detected. Silence. Deep, suffocating silence. Then, slowly, I turn toward Nathan. And I smile. Now, this is interesting. I say, my voice calm, controlled. Because according to this, I'm perfectly fine. Nathan's expression barely changes. But his eyes flicker with something raw. Fear. Guilt. Because he knows what's coming next. And so do I. The real and fertile one. I turn back to the screen, pressing a button on my phone. A second document appears. Another fertility test. But this one, it's not mine. It belongs to Nathan. The heading is just as bold. Just as impossible to ignore. Patient, Nathan Carter. Fertility assessment. Results. Severe infertility detected. I swear, you could hear a pin drop in that room. Nathan freezes. The guests? They're staring. Whispering. My father? He's gripping the table, his face ghostly pale. And my mother? For the first time tonight, Rebecca Carter looks truly horrified. I let the weight of it settle in. Let them soak in the fact that the very thing they mocked me for, the very thing they used to destroy me, was never mine to carry. It was Nathan's. Nathan snaps. Nathan lunges forward. You bastard, he snarls, knocking over a champagne glass as he reaches for me. The crowd gasps. I don't move. I don't flinch. I just watch him come apart at the seams, his whole life unraveling right in front of him. He doesn't make it far. Security grabs him again, holding him back as he thrashes like a rabid dog. Ryan. His voice is hoarse, desperate. You don't understand. This is private. Private. I raise an eyebrow. You mean like how my infertility was private before you and Mom turned it into a dinner table joke? You don't get it. Nathan's eyes are wide, wild with panic. I had no choice. He cuts himself off, chest heaving. And that's when it hits me. Nathan didn't just know. He was forced to live the lie. I glance at my father, who won't even look at me. Then at my mother, whose lips are pressed into a thin, bloodless line. And suddenly, it all makes sense. The burden of being the golden son. They built Nathan up to be the perfect Carter son. The heir. The successful one. The one who would carry on the legacy. And infertility? That was not part of the plan. So what did they do? They switched it. They let me be the failure so Nathan wouldn't have to be. They threw me under the bus, dragged my name through the mud, ruined my reputation. Just so Nathan could stay on his pedestal. I exhale slowly, shaking my head. Wow. I say, my voice thick with mock admiration. You really are pathetic. Nathan yanks against the guards again. Shut up, Ryan. You let them use me. I say, letting my words slice through him. You let them humiliate me, ruin my marriage, make me feel like I was less than a man. And for what? So you could keep pretending? Nathan's face twists in rage. You don't know what it was like. I laugh, a short, bitter sound. I know exactly what it was like, Nathan. You were their golden son. You had everything. And instead of standing up for me, you let them break me. He stills, chest heaving. You let them break me. I repeat. And now look at you. You're standing here, in the ruins of your wedding, your business crumbling, your fiancé gone, and the world watching as the truth comes out. His hands shake. His whole body shakes. You destroyed me first, I tell him, voice low. And I survived it. But you won't. And with that, I let him go. I turn away from him, from my mother's hollow silence, from my father's useless rage. And I step off the stage. The damage is done. I can hear the murmurs growing louder. People are already posting, sharing, talking. I look at my phone. Live viewers, for million. A notification pops up. Breaking news. Scandal erupts at Carter wedding. Family secrets exposed in viral live broadcast. I smirk. Good. Let the world see. Let them all see. Because for years, I was forced to believe I was the weak one. The worthless one. The failure. But now they know the truth. And it's too late to silence me. It starts slowly. The unraveling. Like a single thread being pulled from an expensive suit, barely noticeable at first, until suddenly, the entire thing is falling apart at the seams. And the best part? They don't even realize just how much damage has already been done. Not yet. But they will. The first cracks appear. Nathan is still thrashing against the security guards, his face a mess of rage and desperation. My mother, Rebecca, is motionless in her chair, eyes vacant, like she's watching her whole world collapse in real time. My father, Charles, he's still trying to control the situation, still gripping onto the illusion of power, the same way he's always held on to his money, his influence, his name. But the illusion is already shattering. I watch as he leans in to whisper something to one of his business partners, Mark Calloway, the CEO of a multi-million-dollar development firm. Mark, who once praised my father as a business genius, doesn't even acknowledge him, doesn't even look at him. Instead, he mutters something to his wife and stands up. And just like that, he walks out. Nathan sees it. His entire body stiffens. Then another man stands. Then another. One by one, the business partners, the investors, the executives who once circled my father like vultures waiting for scraps, are leaving. And Charles Carter is left clutching nothing but the remnants of his reputation. I check my phone. Breaking news. The Carter empire is falling. I smile. Because this is exactly what I planned for. Nathan's last stand. Nathan finally breaks free from the guards. He spins toward my father, voice wild with desperation. Dad, he chokes out. Say something. Do something. Charles doesn't answer. Because what can he say? That he can fix this? That he can buy his way out of a scandal that has already reached millions of people? No, not this time. Nathan's panic turns into fury. He rounds on me, pointing a trembling finger. This is your fault, he spits. I tilt my head. Really? You ruined my wedding. My reputation. My entire life. I take a slow sip of my champagne, enjoying every second of his meltdown. No, Nathan, I say, setting my glass down. You did that to yourself. His hands curl into fists. You think you're better than me? I lean forward slightly, lowering my voice so only he can hear. I don't think, Nathan, I whisper. I know. His face twists. He looks like he wants to lunge at me again. But there's nothing left to fight for. Nothing left to protect. Because his entire kingdom is already burning. The final nail in the coffin. A notification pops up on the ballroom screen. Another news alert. SEC investigation launched into Carter Properties. Fraud allegations emerge amidst scandal. The crowd erupts and whispers. My father slams his hand against the table. This is ridiculous, he barks. There's no investigation. I let out a small chuckle. Not yet, I say. Charles whirls on me, his face twisted with rage. You did this. I shrug. Let's just say, I provided some very interesting documents to the right people. Nathan goes rigid. What documents? The screen flashes again. Emails. Bank transfers. Proof of embezzlement. Tax fraud. Bribery. Every dirty deal my father thought he had buried. And now? Now the whole world can see. The walls close in. My father sinks back into his chair. He finally understands. It's over. Nathan's breath is coming out in short, panicked gasps. He grabs my mother's arm. Mom, say something. Fix this. But Rebecca Carter is gone. Not physically, but in every other way that matters. She is staring at the screen. Asterisk asterisk at the undeniable truth about her perfect family. Asterisk asterisk, and she is silent. Because she knows there's nothing left to say. Nothing left to fix. Nothing left to salvage. The business is dead. I stand up, sliding my hands into my pockets. You had everything, I say to Nathan. Power, wealth, privilege. And yet, here you are. With nothing. Nathan shakes his head violently. This isn't happening. This isn't. It is, I interrupt, voice steady. And no amount of lies can change that. He stumbles back, his entire body trembling. And then he bolts. Right out of the ballroom. Right into the night. Leaving behind nothing but his father's ruined empire. I glance at Charles one last time. He doesn't look at me. Doesn't say a word. Because he knows. He finally knows. He lost. And I won. The world watches it burn. I step out of the ballroom, into the crisp night air. I pull out my phone. Check the live stream. 5.2 million viewers. 5.4 million. 5.6 million. The world is watching this empire fall. And I have never felt more free. Because for years, they tried to break me. They tried to ruin me. But tonight, I showed them who I really am. And I will never be silenced again. The air outside the ballroom is cool against my skin. Fresh. Liberating. Like the first breath after being trapped underwater for far too long. Behind me, the empire that once ruled over me crumbles. Inside, my father sits frozen, his carefully built real estate dynasty shattered in front of the entire world. Nathan, my brother, the golden sun, has fled into the night, no longer the untouchable heir, no longer the family's shining example. And my mother? Silent. Because for the first time in her life, she has nothing left to say. But me? I stand tall. Because after years of humiliation, lies, and exile from my own family, I have won. And the best part? This is only the beginning. The aftermath begins. My phone buzzes. A new notification. 6 million live viewers. That's 6 million people who just witnessed my family's fall from grace in real time. I let out a slow breath, watching the numbers tick up. I never planned for this to go so viral. But I should have known. People love a scandal. Especially when it's about a powerful, untouchable family falling to pieces. And right now, the Carter name is front-page news. Another buzz. This time a call. I glance at the screen. David Reed. A longtime friend. An attorney specializing in corporate fraud cases. I answer. Ryan. He greets, his voice smooth and calm. I assume you've seen the news? I have. I reply, walking toward my car. Good. Because I have some updates. I smirk. Let me guess. The feds are interested in dear old dad. David chuckles. Oh, they're more than interested. They're moving forward. The documents you provided were airtight. There's no way out of this. I lean against my car, watching the ballroom entrance from a distance. How long before the hammer drops? I ask. A week, maybe less, David answers. But honestly, he won't even need an arrest to ruin him. His business partners are already cutting ties. Stocks for Carter Properties have dropped by 40% in the past hour. Investors are panicking. The company is dead. I exhale slowly. It's happening. Everything he built on lies and cruelty is falling apart. And for once, there's nothing he can do about it. The fallout spreads. I scroll through the news headlines. The Carter family scandal, infidelity, fraud, and a fall from grace. Ryan Carter exposes his family in shocking live broadcast, millions watch. SEC investigation into Carter properties begins. What comes next? I smile to myself. The Carter name used to be a symbol of success, of power. Now, it's synonymous with corruption, deception, and downfall. I glance back at the entrance. Reporters are gathering, their cameras flashing as guests flee the ballroom like rats escaping a sinking ship. I can already imagine the headlines tomorrow. The wedding that destroyed a dynasty. Beautiful. Nathan's rock bottom. Just as I'm about to get into my car, I hear footsteps. Fast, frantic footsteps. I turn, and there he is. Nathan. His tuxedo is disheveled, his hair a mess. His entire body is trembling with rage and desperation. You think this is funny? He spits, his voice raw. I raise an eyebrow. Funny? No. Satisfying. Absolutely. You ruined my life, he snarls. I lean against the car, crossing my arms. Nathan, your life was already a disaster. I just turned on the lights so everyone could see it. His breathing is ragged. His hands shake at his sides. You don't get it, he whispers. You don't know what you've done. I tilt my head. Oh, I think I do, I say. For the first time, you get to see what it's like to be me. To be the one discarded. The one humiliated. The one they never actually cared about. Nathan swallows hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. You should have let it go, he mutters. I push off the car, stepping toward him. Let it go. I repeat. You spent years tearing me down. You let mom and dad use me as your scapegoat while you stood there and enjoyed the praise. You let Olivia cheat on me with you and laughed behind my back. His jaw clenches. Did you really think I'd let that slide? I ask, my voice dropping. Did you really think I'd just take it forever? He shakes his head, looking at the ground. And for the first time, Nathan Carter looks truly broken. Not the cocky, golden son. Not the arrogant, untouchable heir. Just a man with nothing left. I should feel bad. But I don't. Because he did this to himself. Goodbye, Nathan, I say, stepping back. And then I get into my car, leaving him standing in the ruins of his own making. The new chapter begins. A week later, I sit in a high-rise office in downtown Manhattan. The view is breathtaking. Skyscrapers stretch across the skyline, the city humming beneath me. But my focus is on the TV screen in the corner. Breaking news. Former real estate tycoon Charles Carter under federal investigation for fraud. I sip my coffee, watching as my father is escorted out of his office in handcuffs. The once untouchable king of real estate, now a disgraced criminal. Nathan? No one has seen him since that night. Rumors say he left the city, disappeared to avoid the shame. And my mother? She's keeping a low profile, hiding from the public eye. As for me, I turn my gaze to the desk in front of me. A new contract sits there. A deal with one of the biggest publishing houses in the country. My second book, an in-depth memoir about my journey, my family, and how I rose from the ashes of their abuse, is already a guaranteed bestseller. I pick up my pen, signing my name at the bottom of the contract. And just like that, I close the chapter on my past and step into my future. A year later, the Barnes & Noble in downtown Manhattan is packed. Hundreds of people stand in line, holding copies of my new book, The Truth We Bury. At the signing table, I greet each reader, signing their books, shaking their hands. Many of them share their own stories of surviving emotional abuse, of finding strength in my journey. And for the first time in my life, I know I have purpose. I am not the failure my family tried to make me believe I was. I am stronger than them, better than them. And as I sign the last book, I write the same words I always do. Your voice has power. Don't be silent anymore. And this time, I finally believe it. It's been a year since I destroyed the Carter Empire. A year since I stood in that ballroom and watched everything they built collapse under the weight of their own deception. A year since I turned my pain into power, my humiliation into vindication. A year since I won. And yet, standing here now, in front of a packed bookstore in Manhattan, I realize something. This isn't just about winning. It never was. It's about something bigger. Something greater than revenge. Something greater than me. It's about every single person who has ever been told they are nothing. And tonight, my final message isn't just for my family. It's for all of them. The book signing event, Barnes & Noble, is overflowing. People stand shoulder to shoulder, holding copies of my book, The Truth We Bury, waiting for their turn to meet me. The energy in the room is electric. Excited. Empowered. Because this isn't just a book signing. It's a movement. I sit at a table near the front of the store, a massive banner with my face hanging behind me. I never imagined I'd be here. That people would actually care about my story. That I would become someone worth listening to. And yet, here I am. Signing books. Taking pictures. Hearing their stories. Because, as it turns out, my story isn't just mine. It belongs to every person who has ever been dismissed, ridiculed, and broken by the people who were supposed to love them. And now, we are all breaking free. Together. A familiar face in the crowd. I flip open another book, pen hovering over the first page. What's your name? I ask. The woman in front of me shifts nervously, her hands gripping the hard cover like it's a lifeline. Amanda, she says softly. I smile. Nice to meet you, Amanda. Her eyes shine with unshed tears. I just wanted to say, your book changed my life, she whispers. I left an abusive home because of your story. I finally had the courage to walk away. A lump forms in my throat. This is why I did it. Not for revenge. Not for fame. But for this. For people like Amanda. For the ones who needed a voice when they had none. I squeeze her hand gently before handing her the signed book. Your voice matters, I tell her. Never let anyone silence you again. She nods, tears slipping down her cheeks as she walks away. And then, just as I reach for the next book, I see her. A woman standing at the very back of the line. Her clothes are simple, jeans, a sweater, no jewelry, no makeup. Her once flawless, expensive appearance is gone. And yet, I know exactly who she is. Because I never forget a ghost from my past. Rebecca Carter. My mother. A conversation we should have had years ago. She doesn't move. She just stands there, eyes locked on mine, hesitation in every line of her posture. I stare back, waiting. I should have expected this. Sooner or later, she was bound to find me. But the difference between then and now, I no longer fear her. I own my story. She no longer has the power to rewrite it. Finally, after what feels like an eternity, she steps forward. The people in line glance at her, whispering, murmuring. They know who she is. They know what she did. But she doesn't acknowledge them. She only looks at me. Ryan, she says, voice barely above a whisper. I don't respond right away. Because, honestly, I don't know what she wants. An apology? Forgiveness? Or just one last chance to manipulate me? She clears her throat. I read your book, she continues. Every word of it. I raise an eyebrow. That must have been difficult for you. She flinches. Good. Because reading about the pain she caused is nowhere near as difficult as living it. She shifts uncomfortably. I wanted to come sooner. But I wasn't sure if you'd even speak to me. I lean back in my chair, crossing my arms. Well, here I am. I say. Speak. The bookstore is dead silent. All eyes are on us. She hesitates again before exhaling sharply. I was wrong, she says finally. The words are shaky, foreign, like she's never actually had to say them before. But I don't let her off that easily. Wrong about what? I press. She swallows. About you. About everything. I let your father dictate how I treated you. I let Nathan become the priority. I told myself it was just the way things had to be. I tilt my head. The way things had to be. I repeat. You mean choosing to humiliate me at every opportunity? Turning your back when I needed you? Laughing at my pain. She closes her eyes briefly. I was weak, she whispers. And I was a coward. For the first time in my life, I see something I never thought I would. Guilt. Real, raw guilt. And yet, I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it ever could be. The power shift. She looks at me again. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she says quietly. But I wanted to tell you that I'm trying. Trying. She nods. I left your father, she admits. I started therapy. I moved to a small town outside the city. No more high society. No more pretending. Just me. I study her carefully. This isn't the same Rebecca Carter who sat at that wedding a year ago, sipping wine while I was humiliated. This is a woman who has lost everything. And yet, the question remains, is it enough? I take a deep breath. I don't know if I can forgive you, I admit. She nods, as if she already expected that. But, I continue. I hope, for your sake, you keep trying to be better. A flicker of something crosses her face. Hope. She nods again. I will. And with that, she turns and leaves. No grand reconciliation. No perfect ending. Just two people acknowledging the damage and choosing to walk separate paths. And that's enough for me. The final words. As the night comes to a close, I sign the last book and stand, stretching. It's been a long journey, a painful one, but I made it. I broke free. And now, as I look out at the people who have found strength in my story, I realize something. This was never just about me. It was about every single person who has ever felt small, unworthy, unseen. And now, we see each other. I take one last deep breath, lift my pen, and sign the final book of the night. The same words I always write. The words I live by now. Your voice has power. Don't be silent anymore. Because I never will be again.